Hi there, you're listening to the newly rebranded Commissioning Conversations. Hi, and welcome to Commissioning Conversations. My name is Alice Redmond, and I'm a Senior Media Researcher for Broadcast Intelligence. And today I'm joined by Emma Norton and Ed Guiney, who are both executive producers at Element Pictures. So, hi guys, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And hi. And
Thank you.
First off, congratulations on the successes of the show so far. It's got a lot of great reviews, and it seems to be a wonderfully quite faithful adaptation of such a great book. How are you feeling about all of it now it's out in the world?
Emma?
Hugely relieved, I think, is the simple answer. Obviously, you work on something for such a long time and you hope that you've done a good job and people respond along the way, but there's obviously such a huge build-up of tension before the real world sees it. And I guess with the book, there's such huge fans of the book and like really committed Sally Rooney aficionados, so we felt like we were going to be under scrutiny, and just to have it out there and for the bulk of the response to be really positive has been really, really enjoyable.
And so if we kind of take this all back to the start, how did you begin to kind of pitch this and adapt the book?
Well, we got the manuscript for the book in spring of 2018 when it went out to everybody, went out to the world. And we'd actually already been working on Conversations with Friends, Sally's first book. So I think we sort of had mixed feelings about our chances of getting Normal People. I suppose we thought maybe she mightn't want to have both her properties with one company, and part of me was hoping that I wouldn't like Normal People for that reason, so that we could duck out of the competition. But fortunately or unfortunately or whatever, anyway, we all read it and absolutely fell in love with it. And we worked very closely with BBC, particularly Rose Garnett at the BBC. She read it at the same time. We gave the book to Lenny Abrahamson, who directed the first 6 episodes and is EP on the show and is a long-standing collaborator of ours. We've worked on all his films over the years. And he's incredible, and he absolutely fell for it. And we then, BBC, because it was such a competitive environment, BBC basically said, well, look, on the basis of Lenny's interest, you can go back to Sally and tell her that if you get the book, the show is greenlit. We promise to make it. So that was a very, very compelling argument to make to her. I mean, she was a huge fan of Lenny's anyway, so, she was very well disposed, I think. And obviously we're an Irish company and it's an Irish story and all of that stuff. So we kind of felt we had a kind of some sort of claim to it by dint of that, although I'm sure others would disagree. But yeah, so we started in spring 2018 and with the great sort of knowledge that it was going to be made and we didn't have to jump through hoops. So that was very exciting.
How were the initial conversations at the BBC? So was that just through existing relationships, or did you bring things to them that they then said, if you get the rights, this is greenlit? How did that happen?
Well, that's exactly what happened. We have a very long-standing relationship with them anyway, and we're in constant dialogue about projects. And when Normal People came along, we all agreed that it was something worth going for, and together we went for it and got the rights and embarked on making it together.
Cool.
And I think it's worth adding that Piers Vega was such a huge fan of the book as well, and he was a genuine lover. He loved the story, and I guess from the early meetings that we had with him, it was clear that getting it right for him would be a really important thing, as well as getting it right for ourselves. Like you could tell he was really invested in the story, and also I guess because the book hadn't come out at that point, but was going to be out imminently, there was a real desire to make the show quickly. So it wasn't just that it was greenlit, but it was greenlit and get it made as quickly as you can, which was also really motivating. Sort of put a fire under us. So,
and it's also Hulu are also involved as an American production partner. How did they board the project, and how was that process?
Well, they came on board much later in the process. So we started off with BBC in spring 2018. and we're building the project, and we're on our way towards making it, but we very much wanted to have an American partner. So in spring 2019, a year later, we pitched the project, myself and Lenny Abrahamson with Sally on the phone, pitched the project to broadcasters and SVODs and streamers in the US. At that time, we were involved. We produced The Favourite, and we had a lot of Oscar nominations for that. So we were pitching it, just that weekend, 2 days before the Oscars that year. So there was a kind of good. It was a good environment within which to be pitching the show. Although people were phenomenally interested in it, and at that point, the novel had really established itself as something, extraordinary. But it was really on the basis of the novel, the pitch, and the first screenplay that we were kind of interested in. It was on that basis that we were looking for a US partner, and we had a few people interested, but Hulu really kind of announced themselves as the most passionate and the people with whom we felt we had the kind of clearest sort of common understanding of how to go about it, and they've been amazing partners. Beatrice Springborn there. It's been a great experience with them.
Cool. And did they have any kind of changes that they wanted made, perhaps for the American audience, or any kind of other conditions as a production partner that maybe you hadn't thought about before it was brought up by them?
I mean, it's an interesting question. I think something you expect an American broadcaster would have slightly more assertive views on these things, but actually Hulu were really in tune with the book and the fact that it was a story told in Ireland. And there were certain things we had conversations about with them to ensure that they understood what they were reading, but they never pushed us to make something more explicit or expositional or kind of change a word. There's a few quite kind of specific bits of sort of Irish sort of idioms that are in the series, and Hulu never said, "Oh, our audience aren't going to get that, change it." They just went with the fact that the intention would be clear in the scene and that the words were interesting to people. So they were really open-minded, I think.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that slightly because of the international drama booms really helped with accents and things for international audiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things we all watch, drama from all around the world, and I think being taken into a world that's really specific and authentic and gives you a new version of experience, especially the moment, any kind of form of escapism, even if it's real world escapism, is really interesting. And that authenticity is such a huge part of Sally's writing that it's kind of crucial to honour that in the adaptation as well.
Mm. And in terms of adapting, how did that process start? Because obviously Sally was helped with the adaptation. So what was that process like? Did you begin with her on board, or did she have second passes instead?
Yeah, so we were really lucky that when the kind of project began, Sally was really interested in the idea of coming on board as a screenwriter and was kind of fascinated with the process. And obviously for us, that was just such a great opportunity just to start with her and start breaking the story with her and finding how the ordering and all of those choices that you make at the beginning of an adaptation, she was, crucial to it all and gave us great guidance. And so she then wrote the first draft of the first 6 episodes. And then in the sort of spring of 2019, she was kind of keen to focus on her novel, her next novel. And so we brought in Alice Birch to continue the work on those episodes and continue working with Sally. And then she went on to write further, the rest of the series, Marco Rowe writing episode 11. And we were really lucky. I mean, it's really, it was really interesting for Sally to hand over that responsibility the first time that somebody else wrote words for her characters to speak. And the relief that we had when Sally first looked at Alice's draft of one of her scripts and endorsed it was so huge. But I think Alice has an incredible knack writing in Sally's voice and honouring the tone and the style of the book, that it never really felt like a new writer had entered into the scene. It was just the book kept being adapted, you know.
Nice. And kind of throughout filming, was Sally Rooney involved, or was that something that she kind of separated herself from?
I mean, she's an executive producer on the show, so she's very much part of the conversation, certainly at all the key moments. I mean, when we were filming, she was, you know, she came to visit us a couple of times, but she was in New York for a large part of that time, writing her new novel in New York. But she kept across Russia's, and crucially, actually, was very much part of the casting conversation. You know, kind of finding the Marianne and Connell to, finding the actors to play those parts was a massive kind of stage in the life of the production. And she was all over that and very much part of it. So at all the kind of key points, she was present. And then obviously when we got into post-production, we were into looking at cuts and all that kind of thing. She was very much a part of it. So yeah, so yes, not literally on set all the time, but very much a presence in the creation and the kind of brain trust behind making the show.
And how much of a presence were Hulu and the BBC during filming and also post?
I mean, I suppose we spoke to them every week throughout it all. You know, they were on both sides really engaged with the process, and in sort of quite different ways. With Hulu, they were very, very engaged in kind of watching the cuts, feeding back notes, getting responses on the notes, and it was always kind of intelligently delivered and then intelligently discussed. And then if we didn't necessarily agree, or eventually we would all sort of accept the version that we continued. You know, there was no kind of it was all very thoughtful and positively offered. And then with BBC, I suppose we've got such a good relationship with them from all the other work we do with them. There was a kind of constant conversation around anything that we needed and whenever we needed it. So it was very fluid. I mean, I guess the other thing to say is that they did also just let us go off and get on with it. You know, so that when there was nothing to discuss, we didn't have to be kind of accounting for ourselves.
And did they ever offer?
Yeah. So no, I was just going to say that the other person on the BBC side who was very important is Tommy Bulfin, who was kind of one of the key commissioning executives there, who we worked very closely with alongside Rose Garnett and Piers Wenger.
And between the BBC and Hulu, was there ever anything where one had a slightly different opinion than the other and you had to kind of mediate between the two, as sometimes happens with co-producers?
I mean, to be honest, they really trusted us. And I think also when you have a filmmaker of Lenny's stature in the middle of this, and you have a writer and a writer like Sally and a book like Normal People, I think at the end of the day, it's everyone's job to kind of honor that. And so, whenever there were kind of, questions or suggestions or whatever, we just talked it out. And if it was a really good suggestion that felt like we should take it on board, we absolutely did. And if it was something that didn't feel completely right, then, we'd very gently push back. But it was never, I mean, I think we've been blessed, to be honest. I mean, I think, you hear stories of very, very dysfunctional relationships between US and British co-producing partners or co-commissioning partners. But I think in this case it was, and I'm not just saying it because we're here talking to you about it, but it genuinely was really constructive and very positive, and everyone sort of felt like they were making the same thing. So we very rarely do we get into kind of any touchy or confusing discussions in a way that surprises me, actually. And I thought we would have. It would have been much more difficult than it was, actually.
I think part of, I was thinking about this the other day, is like when you have a novel that is so complete and satisfying as Normal People is, if you were making up the story of Normal People, so many of the story points might have got interrogated or picked apart or, sent off in another direction. But because everyone knew that for the most part the story works, that those big decisions that often like commissioners might have different opinions on, or you might get noted, heavily noted about, all of that stuff wasn't really part of the debate. It was just making sure that everything got right, we got everything right, and that the kind of that enough of the subtext was readable on screen, you know, so making sure that when we'd seen it lots and lots of times, then, you know, the commissioners would watch it, and if they felt that truth wasn't coming up as well as we felt it, we just had to dig in more. So a lot of it is about pulling all of the depth of the material into the screen adaptation.
And did you notice any difference in the marketing at all? Because that's something that we hear a lot from producers, that the US marketing is so different. The trailers cut are so more revealing of the plot from what the UK version would be.
I mean, definitely the two campaigns are really different, and it was really interesting to see those two things evolve. And I think really simple things like the Hulu trailer is much quicker, you know, like it's really fast cut thing, and I think that, you know, they really know their audience and they know how people respond to information, and they do a lot of testing as well on all the materials that they generate. But, you know, I don't know, as a sort of slightly slow-paced European, when I first watched it, I was like, oh, it's very fast. But you know that it really worked. And I suppose the sort of choice of imagery and those sort of things are very different. But somehow they both managed to create campaigns that feel true to the spirit of the show, and then their own channels. You know, obviously they've got such different kind of messages to put across about their own channel as well as the shows they put on it. So.
I mean, to be fair to both of them, they were also incredibly inclusive in discussions around the campaigns. For, you know, both BBC did an incredible job, and Hulu also did an incredible job. They really involved all of us in those and properly listened. And I guess in the same way that we felt that, you know, we really listened to them during the kind of production phase and the scripting and all of that stuff, you know, equally, you know, they really listened to us when it came to, you know, their bit, which was selling the show and marketing it. And even if we didn't quite get what they were at, we kind of understood the rationale. And, you know, in a way in America, it's interesting, kind of the class divide between the two characters is something they really lent into. And also its Irishness, you know, which sort of is slightly counterintuitive, because you might think that they'd actually wanted to kind of feel like more American and not necessarily other, if that makes sense. But they were really keen to lean into those things, and if that's what they felt, you know, they needed to do to kind of sell the show, well, that's okay by us, obviously.
Cool. And you're also adapting oh my god, I've just forgot the title of that.
Conversations.
My mind just went blank, and I was about to say you're also adapting Normal People. Let me start that again. And so you're also adapting Conversations with Friends. So did that come about through Normal People, or it sounded like that came first, maybe?
Yeah, we actually had started developing that with BBC Films as a film before Normal People came about. Yeah, so we started that with Rose Garnett, who we mentioned earlier. And then when Normal People came in, it sort of very much announced itself as a piece for television. We felt very strongly that it was a piece for television and started developing it. And I think through developing and making Normal People, we then realized that actually the right way to do Conversations, you know, properly was as a piece for television, and that actually is the best way of kind of, I think, honoring the kind of characters and the worlds and the stories that Sally creates, you know, that actually they live much better in a kind of the expansive kind of possibilities of a television version, if you like. And so, although we had started with Conversations, we then pivoted we started with Conversations as a film, we then pivoted to television. And I think one of the great things about the BBC is that, you know, Rose and Piers and Tommy all work together, even though Rose is film and they're television, and they all talk about stuff all the time. And so, you know, it was very easy to kind of go, well, you know, this thing exists at the BBC, but what's the best way of making it? Okay, well, we were thinking it should be a film, but now actually on reflection, television seems the best way to go. And so we were all very seamlessly able to kind of lean into that possibility, which you know, we all are very excited by and think is exactly the right way of doing it.
And how far along in the process are you with that?
Well, the writers are writing, you know, so we were due to have a kind of writers' room storylining just as lockdown began, the week of lockdown. So all of that then was a series of Zoom calls where we all got to know each other. Alice Birch is writing on this series, so she knows us and knows we sort of know how she writes and how she thinks. So that was a really nice kind of starting point. But yeah, the first drafts of the first 6 episodes will be coming through to us in the next few weeks. So it's a really kind of joyful thing to have off the back of Normal People finishing and incredibly uncertain times, to know that we've got really more Sally Rooney to work with, and they're always just such juicy conversations. The conversations with friends is a sort of more, it's a less obvious book in some ways. It's not a kind of will they won't they love story. It's something, there's a lot to dig into it. So when you're tucked away in your room at home, to be on a call with lots of people going, what do they mean? It's good fun. So that's where we are with that. And again, it's going to be 12 half hours. I think that's the plan for now. So we wanted to kind of use that structure because it served us so well.
And at the moment it's solely at the BBC, but do you think you'll go to Hulu again or look at other American broadcasters?
I mean, it's very early days in terms of that side of things. So we're kind of happily working away with our friends at the BBC, and we certainly had a really good time with Hulu. And when you have that kind of relationship, it's something that you very much value. But we haven't really gotten into that side of things yet. So.
And are you working with them? Are you working with Sally Rooney in the same way as well, with the scripting, or?
So Sally's on board as an exec for Conversation with Friends, because at the moment she's really still focusing on finishing her next novel. So she's tucked away in the countryside in Ireland, focusing on that. But again, she'll be crucial to all the conversations around, the development of the scripts, and we'll have a kind of constant conversation with Sally. And again, the further we go into production, the conversation will expand, into casting and all the rest. But yeah, there's often points where we, as a group, will get to the kind of question of, we'll just ask Sally that, because we'll all be kind of theorizing about what something might mean, and eventually she gets the casting vote just to tell us what it is.
That's really interesting. And you mentioned that the writers' room has had to start virtually due to lockdown. How are you as a company navigating everything that's been going on?
A lot of this. I mean, really a lot of Zoom calls, and it's weird. I mean, it's very, these calls are intense, and we do a lot of them. I mean, we have 3 films at different stages of post-production. One that we've had to put on hold, Joanna Hogg's film, Souvenir 2, we've just had to put on hold temporarily because we can't continue to work on it at the moment. But we didn't have, we just finished production on Normal People, so we were able to complete the post-production, kind of everyone working remotely, and at our limits. Our post house in Dublin did an incredible job sort of helping us navigate that and deliver the show to Hulu and BBC. And now we're just thinking about how we, get to make things at the other side of all of this. I mean, what's good about this time is that it is great in terms of development and having all these sort of conversations about conversations and other things obviously as well. But yeah, it's I guess our minds are turning to how we actually make things, probably in a world where there isn't a vaccine and where coronavirus is still a factor, and how you work with that kind of threat and risk in the air.
It's a lot to think about. And just to finish up, Normal People is going to be a lot of people's quarantine box set, their go-to watch. It's getting them through lockdown. But I want to know what you guys are watching, what dramas, what TV you're watching to get you through lockdown.
Well, I'm watching The Simpsons because we just got Disney Plus, so I'm watching that with my son, which is great. It's so good, and there's lots of it. And then late at night, I'm watching Fauda, the Israeli show on Netflix, which is brilliant. I'm really enjoying it.
And I'm my children have developed an obsession with Miranda off the back of watching The Big Night In. They think she's hilarious, so they make me watch an episode of Miranda every day. And I've actually never watched Miranda before, so that's new. And then I'm doing nostalgia watching. I've gone back to the start of Peep Show, and it just makes me feel so happy. So I'm watching Peep Show all the time. So nothing new for now.
Wonderful. So thank you very much to both of you for being on Commissioning Chats today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Broadcast Commissioning Conversations. Don't forget to subscribe via any of the major platforms. We'll be back soon with more, but in the meantime, the latest commissioning briefs can be found on broadcastintel.com.